investment tax credit. And then some of my people that are working with me came up with another idea that they call a climate resilience investment grant subsidy. We're trying to figure out ways to stimulate investment, private investment in climate resilience. This has been a big problem because, you know, you can only imagine how much money it's costing the governments when we have a Sandy type storm. It's billions and billions of dollars. And we seem to have a lot of very valuable real estate that's located on the coast. And it's very difficult to justify having single-family homes on the coast, and that's what we have largely. So there's a very big discussion that's going to happen over decades, not over years, about what to do with this coastal real estate. So our project, the New York Wheel, is actually very desirable because it's not housing. It's a big commercial project that's a tourist attraction, and in the event that it actually floods, it can go back to being a tourist attraction. So there is a very big discussion that's a problem with all this coastal real estate being residential and very high-end residential in a lot of cases. So what we're trying to do is actually a very big idea, is to, you know, get legislation at all levels of government, federal, state, local levels, to start promoting investment in resilience. So that's our basic mission. And what we came up with, because I'm basically a finance guy, I'm not an environmental guy, I just got very interested in environmental because it seems to be one of the most important things that are facing all of us. It's not something that's just, you know, one area. As you start to look internationally, you see that the problems are really worldwide now. And everybody's converging that, oh, we got to start moving on something. We dawdle as long as we can dawdle. So this investment tax credit is very strong, and it's been very well received all over the world, interestingly enough. In fact, we have a very dysfunctional legislation here in the States, so I've been actually getting a much better response in the UK, and from the World Bank in Paris, and from the government of the Philippines. So it's fascinating because I just originally thought about this for New York City because we had like a $5 billion shortfall, and I said, well, this would be a good way to fund the shortfall through tax credits. Now, I want to also talk about something because I've been reading in the popular press. It's very interesting that a lot of people are trying to replace the term sustainability with resilience. And there's a fellow named Andrew Zolli who wrote an excellent book called Resilience, and then he wrote an article in the New York Times that basically said resilience is the new term, forget about sustainability basically, and that is really not true because all resilience is an extension of sustainability. Sustainability deals primarily with energy use and efficient energy use and how to make structures and areas more energy efficient. Actually, it's easier to find ways to finance sustainability because you have a payback period, you know, like if you do solar or wind, you know, there's a certain period of time that you save enough money on energy. Resilience is a little more difficult because it's dealing with climate change, and the only real stakeholders are all of us, which let's call us the government, you know, because we're the public. And, you know, businesses are affected, and everybody in the public is affected, but there's no necessarily payback if you put a temporary barrier to, you know, block storm surge, or if you find a way to get water into the southwest United States, you know, where are you really going to get a payback for this? So it's going to be very difficult to finance these things. So what I basically came up with was a way to think about funding it through the tax code. So this, my stepdaughter did this little thing here, and this simply shows you where if whether you're an individual or a company or a hedge fund or whoever you are, you put money into a fund which basically takes this money and then has a board of advisors that says, well, we're going to fund this project and not this project, and basically there would have to be some sort of advisory board. And then the resilience projects would be funded. Now, I see my idea as a gap funding. In other words, it's not going to fund the whole project. if a project's $100 million and they have $10 million that they need funded, that's where I see this coming in for the last $10 million, the hard money, to get funded. Now, once you put your money into the fund, eventually you're gonna file your tax return, and then you say, oh man, I get all this money back. So when you get the money back, the people at Wharton will tell you that there's what they call a multiplier effect. You have a number of different things happening here. This over here generates economic activity through resilience projects. So you're going to create green jobs, which everybody's talking about, and we have to create these green jobs. So that's one form of economic activity. Plus, you're going to spend all this money for materials to do that, so that's another form. Then, when the entity that invested in the fund gets their money back in taxes, they're either going to spend it, or they're going to save it, or they're going to reduce their debt. There's going to be another economic activity here. So that's what they call the multiplier effect. And one of the things that I'm looking for money, working capital, is to do a study to actually quantify how much of an economic impact this resilience fund would generate. And it's going to be significant, probably 5 to 6 times the amount of money. Now there's another factor for the federal government especially. I'm told by the experts that for every dollar they put into resilience, they save $4 on the back end on the next climate event. So the governments are motivated to do this because we have certain issues. You know, I don't know if you're familiar. The flood insurance program is a national program. It's funded by FEMA and the U.S. government. It's basically bankrupt. So there's a lot of talk now about privatizing it, and they're not sure what to do with it. But it's a very big issue, and it's one that I'm hoping that, you know, this idea can help with. I don't know if you can see this, but this gives you a sense of, like, let's take somebody with 100,000 of gross income. I made a certain assumption that you can only put 5% of your gross income into this resilience fund. So in the case of somebody who made 100,000 gross, they could put in $5,000, and then they would get a total of $7,500 in tax savings, the way I visualize it. Because I said 5,000 would come from the federal government in tax savings, 100% of the amount invested, and then the state of Philadelphia, because we're here in Philly, the state of Pennsylvania, would have a 50% credit, which would be $2,500. This is a very aggressive tax credit. It's almost like a tax shelter, because if you think about it, it's money that you would have just paid for your taxes. So it's not money that you would come out of pocket. Anything over $1 for dollar is money that you're actually making. So I'm trying to convince legislators to have a very aggressive credit, because that will bring a lot of money into this space. That's interesting. There's a fellow from the UK who's very big into climate, and he thinks that this idea will be very well received at the World Bank level, because we have a mandate starting in 2020 through the Copenhagen Accord to start putting $100 billion a year into developing countries. Because I've been reading, and maybe you guys can help me on this, that actually the pollution and the carbon emissions are more relevant at the developing level than in our level, because we spent years relatively curtailing our carbon emissions. So even if we continue our efforts, it's kid stuff compared to China and India and Africa and all these other countries. So supposedly, part of this Copenhagen Accord is $100 billion a year goes to the developing countries to help them reduce their carbon emissions. So they think my credit might be really good to convince the U.S., because of course we are not committed to any dollar amount, to have wealthy people put in, you know, money that they would have paid to the government to help fund these requirements. So, you know, I envisioned this as a very local idea just for New York City. And it remains to be seen, because, you know, politically these things take a long time to get through, and we're not sure, but all I know is that it's very well received as a concept. So, you know, just following the math through, if somebody in the state of Pennsylvania who made $100,000 owes $12,000 in federal tax and $3,070 in Pennsylvania tax, because you only have a 3.07% state tax. You're actually lower than New York or New Jersey. So you would have total taxes of $15,000, assuming you just simply owned $100,000 taxes. But you were saving $7,500 from this critic idea that I have. So you actually, basically cut your taxes in half. So suddenly you're going to have $7,500 sitting there that you could either invest in or pay down debt or buy a TV or a trip or something. So there's that multiplier effect that I'm talking about. Because when you get that money back, that's money that you would have just paid to the government. But as I said, if you get back to that idea for every dollar that the federal government spends on resilience, they say 4 in future climate events. So it's actually not such a big deal for the government to lose that tax revenue because they're saving so much in the back end. So, basically what we're trying to do here is start thinking about these resilience programs, because I think we'll all agree that in the future, this is going to become more and more relevant to, be needed for future investment. So one of the things that they told me to do, because I've been talking to a lot of advisors in New York primarily, is to focus on, smaller property owners, multifamily owners, small businesses, building improvement districts, and finding a way to make their structures more resilient. Now, what does that mean? It basically means that, they have to do what we did on a big scale with the wheel. You have to move your mechanicals up. Sometimes you have to lift a structure up because, there'll be sea level rise. And this is becoming a very big issue, and it's one that's just starting now, because as I said, if you have all these houses on the ocean, and if there's going to be 4 to 5 feet of sea level rise, are you going to want to save these houses? Maybe not. And the question is, how long are you going to save areas? See, I know from the New York area, there's areas like the Rockaways and Howard Beach where they're starting to try and save these areas, but eventually these areas may not be savable. So we actually have a few different horizons that we're looking at the government level. You're probably looking at a 50 to 100 year horizon where you're actually going to save areas like the Rockaways or Howard Beach. And then, the city people are telling me that in the year 2100, they're not going to save these areas anymore. They're going to let them go to, nature's way, so they'll probably become public parks. So my concept on this level, which is a little different than the investment tax credit, is we have to find a mechanism to provide 100% financing to small property owners, because they don't have any money. They can't, dip into their pocket. So once again, we had to come up with some financing mechanisms. So we call it this climate resilience subsidy, or a CRIS, I call it. And this is either going to be provided by the municipality or property and casualty insurers or utility companies. The utility companies are kind of interesting because they have like a vested interest to sell you power. So at a certain point, saving too much on power is not really in their best interest. So it's a strange thing with the utility companies. We're not sure how they're actually going to play out. The property and casualty insurers on a lot of flood things, it's almost a non-issue because it's a federal program. So it may come back to the government to have to fall back on this. So we got 10% through some sort of subsidy. But the other 90% we're modeling after something that was done in Berkeley, California. It's called a Property Assessment Clean Energy Model, called a PACE model. What they did was they were trying to stimulate solar energy for residential houses. So what they did was they tied it to the property taxes. So what they did was if they had a $30,000 investment, they would finance all $30,000 through an increase in your property taxes of $30,000. And they issued a bond at the municipality level in Berkeley, and they financed it over 20 years to self-liquidate. So basically, they had this property assessment as a way to stimulate 100% growth. What I'm proposing is a little variation on that, is 90% through this property assessment and 10% through a subsidy. So It's a way to have smaller property owners, and a lot of this, I don't know if you have it in Pennsylvania, but